What is the most painful thing someone has ever told you? A year after he died. Your father never loved you anyways. That's why he pays me child support to look after you. BS. His room was decorated with my childhood art. All his passwords were my name or birthday. He would have long talks with me about his regrets when we hung out. I knew it wasn't true, but nothing has ever hurt so much. Once, my ma told me and my brother that she would have been relieved if we were dead. We were annoying siblings, but that's pretty dark, given we were quite young back then. Now I'm 25, my brother is 20. I'm pretty sure she didn't mean it word by word, but still sad thing to say to your kids. I was adopted at age 3. Last year at age 26, my adoptive father told me he never wanted me. That hurt like a bitch. I'm a city bus driver. With very good intentions, I once informed a homeless woman of where she could get free showers in the city as she smelled horribly of feces. I thought I was helping her. She informed me very calmly that she chose to live in filth and smell that way because it was the only thing that kept her from being raped every night. Nothing has ever crushed me like learning that has. That is the reality of many homeless women. You don't have any friends, do you? My teacher in 10th grade in front of the whole class. When my sister called me 2 weeks ago and just said, "Dad's fucking gone, dude. Oh dad, I miss you so much." I was told by my mother that she would still be happy and married if I hadn't been born. When the paramedic told me we did all we could, but we couldn't save her, after I woke up to find my wife dying next to me. My dad and I just quietly hanging out when he just said it's never been a secret we don't enjoy each other's company. That my father didn't die the way I was led to believe for 20 something years of my life, and he actually died from a nod. I have a father who I'm not really in contact with anymore, messy, and my mom is really the only person left in my life. One day she was pissed off with me and admitted that she never actually liked who I was, even as a child. She loved me and did her duty as a mother, but other than that she didn't like me. After my brother was murdered, I was 13. My friend told me I was too sensitive about it, and some people lose their entire families. My mom telling me that me moving to the other side of the country was going to be another one of my mistakes that I would regret. I didn't regret almost anything I had done in my life and was really hurt by her thinking my life was full of mistakes. I asked someone I was in love with and thought I was in a pretty good relationship with if we could celebrate our 1-year anniversary of starting dating, and he answered no, because it was just supposed to be a fling and not something to celebrate. I've never felt lower or less important in my life. My uncle abused me as a child. I'll let it go years ago, but my mother will be forever traumatized by the event and the effect it had on her family relationships. She recently told my wife that the pedophile sent her a text message saying he really enjoyed the time he spent with her son, 42 years after, just to torture her some more. I took my wife to the ER for back pain. 3 hours later the doctor came in and said she has pancreatic cancer and it has spread to her lungs. I'm so sorry. The life was just sucked out of me that day. You should have just let her stab you, my mom, after I told her my aunt slapped, pushed, and tried to stab me with a kitchen knife earlier that day. A few months after I had turned 18, my dad came downstairs as I was getting out of the shower to tell me that I was a terrible son and that I had a day to move whatever I needed out of the house. I had to go into work that day and let my boss know what had happened and that I couldn't work that day. I came back and hugged my little brother and sister, packed my shit and left. My dad and I have, sort of, made amends since then, but I'll never be able to get what he said out of my head. My mom once told me she must have committed some terrible sin to have given birth to me and that I was pure evil. All because I told her I was quitting dance classes. Overreaction, much? When I was 15 and badly depressed, my parents found out a diary I kept, where I vented a lot. My dad was very worried and upset about it, which prompted my mom to tell me to kill myself if I wanted to do it so bad, instead of making my dad worry so much. Just yesterday my mother, during an argument, told me I was the reason my dog died of cancer. My dog that I drove to a special clinic almost every week for her chemotherapy since 2019. My dog that I would given everything for. It was her puppy that she abandoned and I took in. What she said wasn't just painful. It was the first time in my life that I saw red. I don't love you and never have. We were together for almost 5 years and I was literally stepping on the bus to go to war. My grandmother told me that I would never find someone who would love me. My mother one called me a demon and said she wished I was dead. I've been married for 19 years. I'm still here. When I was in middle school we took a class trip, theater arts, to New York City. Went to Broadway and Statue of Liberty, etc. I was a fat kid at the time. We went to Chinatown to eat at a buffet, and one of the mother chaperones told me she felt sorry for my parents. It always stuck with me, the cruelty of her comment to a 12-year-old kid. What a horrible person in hindsight. An old friend told me that if I wasn't there for him, he likely would have self-harmed and possibly committed suicide. Turns out that I was the closest thing he had to family after life royally fucked him over. I stayed composed while I was with him, but when I got home I cried. You can have a much bigger impact on someone's life than you realize. I moved out at 18 after high school. I was raised by boomers who instilled in me the notion of if you need help, you haven't done enough. My roommate died at work, and I was left to pay all the rent and bills on our crumbly 2-bedroom apartment alone. Hard to do even then when my minimum wage job paid $6.50 an hour. After months of barely making it and racking up debt due to misplaced pride, I had lunch with my mom. I laid everything on the table and started to choke up when I got to the part where I asked for help. I told her I didn't want money and that I was about to be homeless. She thought for the briefest of moments and said, "That's too bad. Let me know how that turns out." I slept under a bridge for 3 months in order to save enough to clear my debts. All the while my old bedroom sat empty with my old futon gathering dust. When I finally broke and told my mom that I was suicidal, she told me to pack my shit and move in with my dad because she didn't want that on her hands. I ended up backtracking because I didn't want to leave, but I still struggle with those thoughts and I'm afraid to bring up the subject again. My stepmom was really abusive growing up. When I was 12 to 13, she found a lighter in my backpack and started freaking out because she couldn't find any drugs. I found a Zippo walking home and was just playing with it / thought it was cool. My dad started hitting me with a belt while she gleefully described how I was going to get raped in prison with a broom handle. It horrifies me that she's a school principal. First relationship I was ever in when I was 18. My boyfriend at the time, after taking my virginity, told me I had one of the ugliest vaginas he'd ever seen. It really fucked me up. I've been with my current boyfriend for 3 years now, and I still have trouble getting naked in front of him, even though he has been nothing but loving. It's not as heavy as almost any of these, but growing up all the way to age 18 I was perpetually called lazy and that I'd just need to settle for some kind of factory work because that's all I'd ever be able to get. My sister was the golden child and overachiever. For some reason it always just cut me deep, even when I was older. My mom didn't even work, the irony of it all. I was close friends with a guy for about 3 years, and then dated him for a year. Ex-boyfriend was one of those people who always spoke honestly, even if it was a shitty thing to say. Relationship got fairly shitty / abusive for the second half. Once we broke up, We had some space from each other and then started hanging out in a group again. During one of these meetups, we were all drinking. I cannot remember how the conversation got to this point, but my ex goes to say something and then stopped himself. This had never happened before, and so all of us were curious to know what thought had entered his brain that was so bad even he stopped himself. Turns out the dude hadn't been sexually attracted to me ever, both as a friend and as a girlfriend. But he realized we got along well and wanted to have a girlfriend / start having sex. So he had trained himself to find me attractive by using Pavlov's methods. He did psychology at university to condition his brain to link me and sex / orgasming. I got the fuck out of there and haven't spoken to him since. Still don't know why that fact was the last straw for my brain compared to the abuse. This is a too fair from both sides. My dad was a military officer and at the time was in charge of an ROTC unit at a university. There were not bases nearby, so he was the ranking officer in the area. A new recruit, not related to the ROTC unit, just a young airman, died in training, and it was my dad's job to inform the family. It turns out another brother had applied to the academy, and it was also my dad's job to tell families they were accepted. So when my dad showed up, they naturally assumed it was about him. They were so excited to see him at the door. Easily the most heartbreaking story I've heard. Last year I had to tell my dad that my sister passed away on the same day my mom had a stroke and was in the hospital. COVID restrictions were in full effect and no visits were allowed to my mom. He had to hold that information for 2 weeks before my mom was released. Life can be cruel and ugly and awful. Be sure to hug your loved ones and don't leave things unsaid. I've heard two inhumanly painful things in my life, and I hope I never listen to anything mildly like that again. Your sister tried to kill herself last night. She's in the hospital right now. My mom, about a year ago. I just can't do this anymore. I want to die as soon as possible and forget about my problems. My girlfriend, about a month and a half ago. Both are better now, fortunately. Although, GF is still fighting depression and anxiety, but I'm there for her whatever she needs. The girl I liked asked me out on April Fools, in front of many other students. The vet telling me yesterday there was nothing he could do for my dog, and that he wouldn't blame me for choosing to let him go. Yesterday was the hardest day I've had in a long time. I love and miss you, Gibson. 11 years ago I dated a girl who told me she'd break up with me if I got antidepressants, and then asked me if she could have some of my stuff if I killed myself. I have not dated since. In middle school I texted my friend that I liked her, and her response was something like, "Oh yeah, I think I feel the same way, but IDK since I'm like a 7, and you're like a 2. No offense, oddly enough at the time it didn't really affect me, but when I retold the story recently I realized how brutal that was. Needless to say, we weren't friends for much longer after that, and she moved away lol. A few weeks after returning from Afghanistan, in an argument my so said we are all so much happier and better off when you are gone. That shit hurt. After getting injured in the army and gaining weight, my ex-wife, who had also gained weight, told me I wasn't the man she married anymore, and she didn't want to have sex with me anymore. Not so important than others, but since my dream was to host a radio show, it was painful when a friend of mine told me I have a really bad voice. Plus, it didn't help with my low self-esteem problems. After my 31 meters divorce, a former friend, 29F, told me that I was completely valueless to the opposite sex. My grandmother, who practically raised me, crying saying she'd give her life for me to just be okay and not have my problems. Either that or, when I stormed out of the house and driving around after a huge argument / breakdown on my part, and she called me asking me to come back, saying who on this earth loves you more than Ebola. Killed me because I realized no one will ever love me the way she does. I've been having severe mental issues since I was like 10 years old and my problems don't really have a cure, so that cut deep. All my grandparents want is for me to be happy and that's the only thing I can't give them. I lived with my grandparents after parents divorced. I was in 4th grade, got back from a long weekend camping trip with the Boy Scouts. Grandma wanted to hang out and watch TV since I had been gone. I said no and went out to see a movie with a friend and his mom instead. When I got back she was already in bed, so I just went to bed. I was woken up at 4 in the morning by my mom telling me that grandma is gone. I walked into her bedroom and the only words my grandpa said to me were, "She's so cold," as he was holding her hand crying his eyes out. I was so fucked up by this BC I brushed her off to go see a movie. I'm 28 now, and it is still on my mind weekly. The next instance is when my grandpa had surgery and he never got out of bed after BC. He was just too weak. After that he was in hospice at home. I was supposed to spend the night, but decided I wanted to go home and be in my own bed. The next morning I get a call from my brother sounding very sad. All he said was grandpa passed away last night. These two moments will stick with me forever. They cause me great pain anytime I see someone's grandparents or hear or a loss. Moral of the story: hang out with your loved ones. Talk to them. Listen to them. Be with them. It'll make the day when they are no longer there a little more bearable. When I took our much loved cat to the vet for what I thought would be a routine checkup, and he said, "Your pet has a sizable inoperable cancerous tumor and needs to be put to sleep as soon as possible." While discussing about my depression and the apathy that comes with it, my mom, who usually is the most loving person in the world, told me how much of it is your condition and not laziness. You ask me. It's laziness. Hearing this from my mother just cut so deep, I immediately burst into tears. Big grown man, sitting on the floor, sobbing. I had a counselor who told me I was not smart enough to go to college or university, and I should accept that I would never amount to anything. I didn't go back to her office after that, and the look on her face was priceless when I ran into her after completing college/university.